Steel, fire, and myth blurred on Hitler's drawing board. During the final years of the Third Reich, Nazi engineers promised weapons so advanced they could reverse the course of the war. Allied intelligence feared them. Nazi propaganda glorified them. But declassified reports and post-war analysis tell a far more grounded story of desperation, misallocation, and technological illusion. Let's uncover the 15 facts that history never told in full. 1. The V-2 rocket was a technological leap that nearly won the war. The V-2 rocket is often portrayed as a breakthrough weapon, Germany's last best hope to change the course of the war through technology. The common narrative suggests the Allies were fortunate the program came too late, and that had it been deployed earlier, the outcome might have shifted. In many documentaries and public histories, the V-2 is described as the world's first ballistic missile, an unstoppable terror from the sky. This myth largely originates from a combination of wartime Nazi propaganda and post-war fascination with the scientists behind the weapon, particularly Wernher von Braun. The Nazi regime heavily publicized the V-2 as a vengeance weapon, Vergeltungswaffe, meant to strike fear into the hearts of Londoners and restore national pride after years of military setbacks. Later, American media elevated its status further when many of its developers were brought to the US under Operation Paperclip, connecting it to Cold War-era rocket development and the space race. But records from German military archives and Allied intelligence assessments reveal a different picture. The V-2 rocket, despite its engineering complexity, was deeply inefficient and strategically ineffective. Each missile cost the equivalent of a medium bomber, but carried only a 1-ton warhead. Unlike bombers, however, it could not adjust its aim mid-flight or choose targets of opportunity. Military reports confirm that the V-2 program consumed massive resources, tens of thousands of workers, much of it forced labor, and enormous amounts of high-grade steel, fuel, and electronics, without providing proportional battlefield results. Between September 1944 and March 1945, over 3,000 V-2s were launched, mostly at London and Antwerp. Yet the missile's accuracy was limited, and its psychological effect proved greater than its military impact. Civilian casualties were high, but infrastructure damage was inconsistent and unpredictable. Historians now agree that the rocket's true legacy lies not in its World War II utility, but in its role as a technological foundation for later Cold War missiles. The V-2 was not a decisive weapon, but a symbolic one, an expensive and desperate attempt to showcase Nazi technological superiority in the face of inevitable defeat. Its myth endures more due to its futuristic appearance and post-war reuse than its actual impact on the conflict. 2. Nazi jet fighters could have dominated the skies if built sooner. One of the most persistent narratives about late-war German aviation is the belief that had the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter been deployed earlier, it could have changed air superiority over Europe. The aircraft is often described as far ahead of its time, able to outrun any Allied plane, and held back only by Hitler's interference. This myth finds its roots in post-war assessments by Allied pilots and commanders, who acknowledged the Me-262's speed and firepower. Nazi propaganda reinforced the image of the aircraft as a wonder weapon, and after the war, its legacy was amplified by aviation historians and technology enthusiasts impressed by its design. But declassified Luftwaffe correspondence and Allied technical intelligence paint a fuller picture. The Me-262 was indeed fast. Capable of nearly 540 metric points, it outpaced every Allied piston engine fighter. However, the aircraft was plagued by reliability issues. Jet engine technology in 1944 was immature. The Jumo 04 engines lasted, on average, just 25 operational hours before failure. Maintenance was difficult, spare parts were limited, and training for pilots was inconsistent at best. More importantly, the German military-industrial system by 1944 was too strained to support jet production at scale. Allied bombing campaigns disrupted supply chains, and factories lacked the infrastructure to build advanced aircraft in large numbers. Although over 1,400 Atwar M2662s were produced, only about 200 ever saw combat due to fuel shortages, pilot attrition, and logistical failures. The popular claim that Hitler sabotaged the Mi-262 by insisting it be used as a bomber rather than a fighter also oversimplifies a complex reality. While Hitler did advocate for a fighter-bomber variant, records show that Mi-262s were flown as interceptors before the war's end. The delays were more systemic than personal. The Mi-262 was a remarkable aircraft, but it was not a war-winning machine. Its deployment was too limited, its engines too fragile, and its impact too isolated to shift the air war's outcome. The myth of its lost potential reflects more on the desperation of the Third Reich and the allure of futuristic designs than on military feasibility. 3. Germany's super tanks were the ultimate battlefield machines. Popular history often glorifies German heavy tanks like the Tiger I, Tiger II, and the Maus as invincible machines of war. Their thick armor and powerful guns gave them a fearsome reputation that persists in documentaries and wargames. It's often assumed these tanks were unstoppable on the battlefield, held back only by the weight of numbers. This belief was cultivated both during and after the war. Nazi propaganda units filmed Tiger tanks in action to impress domestic audiences. After the war, Allied tank crews frequently recounted encounters with German heavy armor, often under conditions that favored the defenders. These stories, combined with the imposing look of the tanks themselves, helped build the myth of their tactical superiority. But logistical reports, battlefield records, and engineering assessments tell a more nuanced story. The Tiger rivalries, introduced in 1942, had formidable firepower and armor, but suffered from mechanical unreliability. Its Maybach engine was underpowered for its weight, leading to frequent breakdowns, especially in muddy or rugged terrain. The tank's complexity made repairs slow and required highly trained crews and specialized parts. The Tiger II, or Königstiger, increased armor and firepower but made logistical problems worse. At nearly 70 tons, it could barely cross many bridges and was vulnerable to being immobilized by its own weight. Fuel consumption was extreme at a time when Germany's fuel supplies were collapsing. The Maus, the heaviest tank ever built, was essentially unusable in combat and existed more as a propaganda piece than a battlefield weapon. In contrast, Allied tanks like the American Sherman or Soviet T-34 were designed for mass production, ease of repair, and operational mobility. They could be destroyed more easily, but they could also be replaced far more rapidly. German tank commanders frequently faced situations where mechanical failure or fuel shortages disabled more vehicles than enemy fire. Historians now emphasize that the Wehrmacht's focus on super tanks was tactically seductive but strategically flawed. These machines were engineering feats, but not suited to Germany's deteriorating war conditions. Their legacy survives in museums and media, but their battlefield contribution was marginal compared to their cost. 4. The Nazi America bomber was close to striking the U.S. mainland. Among the more enduring myths of German wartime technology is the idea that the Luftwaffe nearly developed a long-range bomber capable of reaching the American East Coast. Known as the America Bomber Project, this weapon is often portrayed as a looming threat that only narrowly failed to materialize. The origins of this belief lie in genuine planning documents and prototype development programs within the Luftwaffe between 1942 and 1944. The Nazi High Command, particularly Hermann Göring, did express interest in transatlantic bombing capabilities. Several firms, including Messerschmitt, Junkers, and Focke-Wulf, submitted designs for aircraft that could carry payloads across the Atlantic. But detailed analysis of the program reveals that the America bomber was more aspiration than reality. Archival records show that none of the submitted designs progressed beyond prototypes or wind tunnel testing. The Messerschmitt Me-264, often cited as the closest candidate, only saw 3 prototypes built. It never reached operational testing and suffered from poor performance and mechanical limitations during trials. Fuel limitations, engine reliability, and lack of suitable runways made the concept practically impossible. The Germans lacked both the logistical infrastructure and the strategic rationale to make such a bomber feasible. By the time the designs matured, Germany was already losing the war on multiple fronts. The resources required to produce and maintain such aircraft, especially in the numbers needed for any meaningful campaign, were simply unavailable. Declassified U.S. intelligence reports did monitor potential German long-range capabilities, but by 1944, the assessment concluded that no such aircraft posed a credible threat. The fear of an intercontinental strike helped shape early Cold War air defense thinking, but it was rooted more in possibility than actual progress. The America bomber myth reflects a broader tendency to overstate Nazi technological reach. It speaks more to post-war anxieties and the fascination with what-if scenarios than to the operational realities of 1940s aviation. 5. German secret weapons were decades ahead of Allied science. It is often claimed that German scientists developed technology during World War II that was decades ahead of the Allies, sometimes even suggesting breakthroughs in radar, guided missiles, and nuclear research that could have revolutionized warfare. This belief is often cited to explain why so many German scientists were absorbed into US and Soviet programs after the war. This myth stems in part from post-war secrecy and the mystique surrounding Nazi research facilities. The Allied powers, through programs like Operation Paperclip, did aggressively recruit German experts in rocketry, physics, and aeronautics. Propaganda on both sides amplified the idea that Nazi science held hidden, futuristic knowledge that could tip future balances of power. But careful analysis of wartime records and captured documentation suggests a more modest picture. In fields like rocketry and jet propulsion, German advancements were real, but also limited by poor reliability and incomplete understanding of long-term systems engineering. In radar, Germany lagged significantly behind Britain's chain-home network and American microwave radar systems. Guided weapons like the Fritz X existed, but required clear weather and visual guidance, making them operationally inconsistent. Nuclear research is the clearest case of inflated reputation. Although scientists like Werner Heisenberg worked on atomic projects, records from the Farm Hall transcripts, covert recordings of German physicists held in British custody, show that they misunderstood key principles required to build a working bomb. Their theoretical models were flawed, and their uranium enrichment efforts were far behind the Manhattan Project. The belief in Nazi scientific superiority reflects a post-war fascination with lost knowledge and secret weapons. It is reinforced by the dramatic appearance of some German technology and its repurposing during the Cold War. But historians now agree that while German engineers made notable contributions in specific areas, the idea that they were decades ahead is exaggerated. Their work was often undercut by political interference, poor coordination, and catastrophic resource shortages. This myth, like many others, survives because it tells a dramatic story. But the archival truth reveals a fragmented, overhyped research effort, not a technological utopia lost to history. 6. The Wunderwaffe could have turned the tide of the war. In post-war narratives and popular media, Nazi Germany's so-called Wunderwaffe, or wonder weapons, are often depicted as futuristic technologies that, if deployed earlier or in greater numbers, might have changed the outcome of the war. These included guided missiles, jet aircraft, electromagnetic weapons, and massive tanks, seen not only as advanced, but potentially decisive. This belief stems from a combination of Nazi propaganda and Cold War-era mythologizing. In 1943, as the war turned against Germany, Joseph Goebbels popularized the term Wunderwaffe to maintain morale and suggest that secret weapons would soon alter Germany's fortunes. These claims were widely circulated in German media and later echoed by Allied analysts intrigued by captured technology. By the 1950s, references to Nazi superweapons appeared frequently in Western publications, often with speculative claims and limited evidence. But military and technical archives compiled by both Allied and German sources offer a more grounded picture. Many Wunderwaffe projects were impractical, underdeveloped, or technologically unsound. The sun gun, a proposed space-based mirror to focus solar energy as a weapon, never advanced beyond sketches. The V-3 cannon, intended to bombard London with suborbital shells, suffered from flawed engineering and was destroyed before becoming operational. The land cruiser P-1000 Rata, a 1,000-ton tank designed on paper, would have required more fuel than the Reich could spare and was cancelled by Albert Speer as a logistical impossibility. Even deployed systems, such as the aforementioned V-2, were strategically ineffective. Others, like the Heinkel Hay 162 jet fighter, were rushed into service with untrained pilots and fatal design flaws. Historians reviewing Speer's correspondence and production records consistently note that many Wunderwaffe ideas were responses to worsening battlefield conditions, not viable paths to victory. The reality is that these so-called miracle weapons reflect the strategic disorientation of the Nazi leadership in the war's final years. Their promise masked internal dysfunction, poor coordination between military branches, and the collapse of Germany's industrial base. Far from being Germany's salvation, they became symbols of its desperation. The myth endures because it speaks to technological fascination, but the historical record reduces the Wunderwaffe to ambitious prototypes, more impressive in theory than in combat. 7. Germany's advanced submarines almost defeated the Atlantic convoys. It is often believed that Germany's late-war U-boats, especially the type 21 Elektroboot, came dangerously close to cutting off Allied supply lines across the Atlantic. Some accounts describe these submarines as so advanced that, had they been launched earlier, they could have reversed the naval war. This narrative emerged from genuine Allied concern over the new U-boat designs discovered in 1944-45. The Type 21 featured a streamlined hull, faster underwater speed, and a snorkel system allowing extended submerged operation. These innovations were, in technical terms, significant leaps from earlier U-boats and influenced post-war submarine design. However, archival reports from the Kriegsmarine and Allied naval intelligence paint a more complex picture. While nearly 120 Type 20 boats were constructed, only 2 ever undertook combat patrols before Germany's surrender in May 1945. Most were incomplete, unseaworthy, or trapped in port by fuel shortages and Allied bombing. Engineering flaws plagued the production process. Hurried assembly led to alignment errors, leaky hulls, and mechanical failures. Historians reviewing captured records at facilities in Bremen and Kiel note that many submarines required months of repair before they could safely deploy. Operational U-boats during the final year of the war faced increasingly sophisticated Allied anti-submarine tactics. High-frequency direction finding, HFDF, radar-equipped aircraft, improved depth charges, and coordinated convoy escort groups dramatically reduced U-boat survivability. By 1944, U-boat crews had become some of the most vulnerable personnel in the German military. Submarine losses far exceeded successful attacks. Even earlier in the war, the notion of U-boats nearly defeating the Atlantic supply chain is overstated. German wolfpacks caused significant disruption in 1941-42, particularly during the Second Happy Time off the U.S. coast. But Allied shipping volumes increased year after year, and convoy systems became increasingly resilient. Documents from the British Admiralty and U.S. Navy show a steady decline in shipping losses from late 1943 onward. The myth of the unstoppable U-boat reflects a post-war appreciation for submarine innovation rather than an accurate view of their wartime effectiveness. In practice, Germany's technological advances came too late and under conditions too constrained to impact the outcome at sea. 8. Nazi Germany was close to building an atomic bomb. A frequently repeated claim is that Nazi Germany came close to developing an atomic bomb, and that only a combination of bad luck, sabotage, or Allied espionage prevented them from achieving a nuclear weapon before the United States. This belief gained traction during the early Cold War, when fears of nuclear proliferation prompted renewed interest in Nazi atomic research. Figures like Werner Heisenberg were central to this myth, and the secrecy surrounding Operation Alsos, an Allied mission to capture German nuclear scientists, only added to the intrigue. However, detailed analysis of captured German documents and the transcripts from Farm Hall, where top German physicists were secretly recorded by British intelligence, provide clarity. These records show that Germany's nuclear project, while ambitious, lacked critical elements. The scientists had neither the theoretical consensus nor the industrial infrastructure required for bomb development. Heisenberg's group at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute made several key miscalculations, including the amount of fissile material needed to achieve a chain reaction. The Nazi program focused largely on nuclear reactors and did not prioritize isotope separation, essential for creating weapons-grade uranium or plutonium. Records show limited quantities of uranium and a lack of sustained investment. More importantly, Speer's armaments ministry placed nuclear research at a low priority, viewing it as a long-term venture with little relevance to the immediate war effort. While German scientists were aware of the theoretical potential for a bomb, their understanding was incomplete. When news of the Hiroshima bombing reached Farm Hall in August 1945, the German physicists were surprised, not only by the weapon's existence, but by the technical achievement it represented. Their recorded conversations revealed that they had significantly underestimated what was possible. The myth of the Nazi atomic bomb persists because of its dramatic implications. Yet historical records confirm that Germany was far behind, not just technologically, but conceptually. The Allied Manhattan Project outpaced its German counterpart in every critical dimension: funding, personnel, logistics, and scientific collaboration. Understanding this distinction reshapes perceptions of Nazi science, not as a missed opportunity, but as a fundamentally limited enterprise hampered by internal politics, insufficient resources, and flawed methodology. 9. Nazi helicopter projects were nearly ready for battlefield use. Some narratives claim that Nazi Germany developed and nearly deployed helicopters during World War II, machines that, had they been used in combat, might have revolutionized tactical mobility and reconnaissance. This belief stems from real German experiments with vertical flight, particularly the Flettner FL-282 Kolibri and the Focke-Achilles Fa-223 Drache. These were among the first practical helicopters built, and their existence has been widely cited as evidence of German innovation. Yet military production records, technical evaluations, and combat reports show that these aircraft were not close to operational readiness on any meaningful scale. The FL-282 was a compact, open-cockpit helicopter primarily used for naval reconnaissance testing. Though stable in flight and capable of short-range operations, only a handful were ever produced, and even fewer flew due to fuel shortages and Allied bombings of manufacturing sites. The Fa-223, larger and more capable, was tested for mountain rescue and transport missions. But again, production was sporadic and often interrupted. Archival materials from the Luftwaffe and German aircraft manufacturers show that, by 1944, fewer than 24 operational helicopters of all types existed in the entire Wehrmacht. Spare parts were scarce, maintenance was difficult, and trained pilots were in short supply. Though a few were flown in support roles, including one in a successful Alpine rescue mission in 1945, the idea that helicopters were near frontline deployment is unsupported by evidence. Allied forces captured several prototypes, and post-war tests in France and the United States confirmed their technical promise. However, these machines were best viewed as experimental platforms, not ready weapons of war. Their legacy lay in post-war development, not wartime application. The myth of combat-ready Nazi helicopters endures because of the modern familiarity with rotary-wing aircraft and the appeal of early adoption. But contemporary reports confirm these machines were logistical novelties, fascinating, but far from functional. 10. German weapons were superior because of precision engineering. A widely held belief is that German weapons during World War II were superior due to unmatched engineering quality, machines built with such precision that they outclassed Allied counterparts across the board. This perception extends from tanks to firearms, suggesting that German design excellence translated into battlefield dominance. The origin of this myth lies in post-war admiration for German industrial craftsmanship, particularly in the automotive and mechanical sectors. Allied soldiers encountering captured weapons often remarked on their sophistication. Weapons like the MG-42 machine gun or the 88mm flak cannon were impressive, and some German tools and optics did outperform equivalents in narrow technical categories. However, evidence from military production records, field maintenance logs, and logistical analyses presents a different picture. Precision engineering, while admirable, came at a high operational cost. German tanks like the Panther and Tiger required extensive factory calibration, complex parts, and frequent repairs. In contrast, American Sherman tanks and Soviet T-34s were simpler, more rugged, and far easier to mass produce and maintain under combat conditions. The MG-42, though effective, consumed barrels at a high rate and required trained gunners. The STG-44, a revolutionary assault rifle, was never fielded in sufficient numbers to influence infantry tactics. Optics and instruments used in artillery and aircraft were finely crafted but difficult to replace. By 1944, Germany's industrial base could not sustain the upkeep these weapons required. Allied logistics reports consistently show that simplicity and standardization outperformed intricate engineering in wartime conditions. Quantity, durability, and ease of use determined combat effectiveness more than precision tolerances. German weapons often broke down in the field, and spare parts were not readily available. As one U.S. Ordnance report noted, over-engineered systems require over-engineered logistics. The myth of German engineering superiority persists because of selective examples and peacetime comparisons. Yet wartime functionality demanded more than craftsmanship. It demanded scale, reliability, and adaptability. The reality is that over-engineering became a liability when the war turned into a battle of attrition. Understanding this distinction challenges popular perceptions of German technological dominance and highlights the strategic value of simplicity under fire. 11. Nazi science was united by a shared strategic vision. It is often assumed that Nazi Germany's advanced weapons programs operated under a unified scientific and military strategy, an integrated effort guided by clear priorities and coordinated leadership. In this view, brilliant engineers worked toward a common goal, harnessing the best minds in Germany for a singular military purpose. This perception was shaped by wartime propaganda and reinforced in post-war portrayals of figures like Wernher von Braun, Ferdinand Porsche, and Walter Dornberger. The streamlined narrative of centralized innovation underpins the myth of Nazi technological precision. In truth, however, Germany's weapons development was riddled with overlapping authorities, personal rivalries, and institutional dysfunction. Archival records from the Reich Ministry for Armaments and War Production, particularly those reviewed in post-war Nuremberg documents, show that weapons programs often competed rather than cooperated. Heinrich Himmler's SS ran its own parallel research structures, independent from Albert Speer's ministry. The Luftwaffe, Kriegsmarine, and Wehrmacht rarely shared data, and projects were routinely duplicated. The V-Weapons program, for example, suffered delays due to rivalries between the Army Ordnance Office and SS Technical Branch. Historians such as Michael Geitenbeek and Rainer Karlsch have traced how internal sabotage, bureaucratic secrecy, and lack of standardization plagued many late-war efforts. Scientific teams often had to work without access to crucial battlefield feedback or production realities. Even within successful programs, like the development of the jet engine, competition between Junkers and BMW led to incompatible designs and production setbacks. Declassified correspondence between Speer and Hitler in late 1943 reveals growing frustration at the fractured nature of R&D. Instead of a centralized command structure, Germany's scientific output was the product of fragmented initiative, driven as much by ideology and personal ambition as by military necessity. Behind the image of technological sophistication was a chaotic system where science was exploited, compartmentalized, and often misunderstood by those in power. The cost was not only inefficiency, but also lives, wasted resources, delayed deployments, and unrealistic strategic expectations that led to prolonged conflict. The truth undermines the idea of a singular German war machine. It reveals something more human, a system where vision was clouded by ego, where knowledge was fragmented by politics, and where the myth of unity masked deeper contradictions. 12. Germany's high-tech factories were immune to Allied bombing. Popular accounts often suggest that despite relentless Allied bombing campaigns, Nazi Germany's production of advanced weapons remained remarkably resilient, undeterred, underground, and largely intact until the final months of the war. The idea implies that technology hubs and armaments facilities survived longer than expected and continued to churn out war-winning hardware. This belief partly stems from German propaganda, which frequently showcased images of bomb-proof facilities and continued arms production under siege. It was also echoed in post-war narratives that emphasized German efficiency under pressure, reinforcing the perception that Allied bombing achieved limited industrial disruption. But wartime production reports, RAF bomber command logs, and German Armaments Ministry data tell a different story. Speer himself admitted in post-war testimony that while early Allied bombing was unfocused, the 1944-45 campaigns caused catastrophic disruption. The raids on synthetic fuel plants such as Leuna and Pöllitz in June and July 1944 reduced fuel output by over 90%. Luftwaffe training flights were grounded, tanks stood idle, and jet aircraft, including the Me-262, often went unfueled. The bombing of the underground V2 facility at Mittelwerk did not stop production entirely, but reduced output and forced resource diversion. Meanwhile, key facilities like Peenemünde, site of rocket development, were targeted effectively in Operation Hydra, August 1943, killing critical engineers and halting testing for months. Precision bombing improved significantly with the introduction of Pathfinder units and radar guidance systems. Internal Wehrmacht memos from 1944 show growing concern over delays in weapons delivery, shortages in raw materials, and dwindling output from key sectors. In Speer's own words, the Allied bombing campaign deprived us of the possibility of victory. He noted that by late 1944, Germany could not maintain a war of attrition, especially with jet aircraft and advanced weapons requiring high-quality alloys and electronics, materials now scarce or unreachable. What the public often overlooks is the complexity of high-technology warfare. German weapons required precise manufacturing environments, skilled labor, and stable logistics, all increasingly impossible under sustained aerial bombardment. The myth of underground immunity conceals the devastating attrition inflicted by strategic bombing, particularly when industrial targets were prioritized and persistently hit. The evidence reveals not resilience, but collapse, hidden beneath propaganda and reinforced by the deceptive quiet of factories no longer operational. 13. Forced labor was efficient and indispensable to superweapon production. Many histories mention forced labor in Nazi Germany's armaments industry, but often frame it as a regrettable necessity, brutal but effective. Some accounts even suggest that without forced labor, the Third Reich's advanced weapons programs would have collapsed entirely. This view implies a grim form of efficiency, inhumane but productive. This belief emerged from wartime assumptions and post-war rationalizations by German industrialists. After 1945, figures like Albert Speer downplayed their culpability by emphasizing that the system, though morally flawed, had kept weapons production going under extreme pressure. The image of the reluctant technocrat prevailed. But detailed investigations by the International Military Tribunal and post-war researchers reveal a more brutal and inefficient reality. At Mittelbau-Dora, where V2 rockets were assembled, over 60,000 forced laborers were deployed between 1943 and 1945. Nearly one-third of them died from starvation, disease, and abuse. Medical reports from captured German doctors documented mortality rates of up to 30% in some camps, numbers consistent with concentration camp records. Production schedules were routinely disrupted by labor shortages, illness, sabotage, and low morale. Engineers at Peenemünde and Dora frequently reported misaligned parts, broken tools, and assembly errors. British and American interrogators later found that some V-2 rockets failed in flight not due to design flaws, but due to laborer sabotage, loosened bolts, reversed cables, and unstable fuel mixtures introduced deliberately under duress. Historical research by scholars such as Michael Thad Allen and André Sellier confirms that forced labor slowed production more than it helped. Skilled workers were rarely available, and coercion could not replace technical competence. The ideological desire to exploit conquered populations and prisoners overrode practical logic. Dehumanization took precedence over productivity. What appears at a distance as industrial output was, up close, a machinery of suffering, chaotic, inefficient, and ultimately self-defeating. The system consumed its labor faster than it could deliver weapons. And in doing so, it revealed the deeper contradiction at the heart of Nazi war production, where ideology undermined strategy and cruelty sabotaged itself. Behind each so-called superweapon lay not just ingenuity, but agony. Lives erased beneath the floor of technological ambition. 14. The German military fully backed the superweapon strategy. It is often assumed that Germany's high command, particularly the Wehrmacht General Staff, supported the deployment and prioritization of advanced weapons like the V-2, jet aircraft, and heavy tanks. The narrative suggests a unified military belief in technology as the path to victory. This idea was shaped by the grand presentations made to Hitler at Obersalzberg and Rastenburg, where engineers showcased prototypes before enthusiastic officers. Newsreels showed generals inspecting weapons with apparent approval, reinforcing the image of alignment between science and strategy. But internal Wehrmacht communications, war diaries, and post-war testimony reveal a more divided reality. Field commanders often expressed skepticism about the practicality of advanced weapons. Colonel General Heinz Guderian, in his writings and correspondence, criticized the over-reliance on expensive heavy tanks. General Alfred Jodel's staff logs contain entries noting frustration with the V-2 program, describing it as impressive but militarily meaningless. Operational concerns dominated these criticisms. The V-2's limited accuracy made it unsuitable for battlefield use. Jet aircraft required long, well-maintained runways, often unavailable by 1945. Heavy tanks, while powerful, consumed disproportionate amounts of fuel and spare parts. Military logisticians warned repeatedly that these systems disrupted supply chains and diverted resources from more reliable armaments. Historians such as Richard Overy and Adam Tooze have documented the growing disconnect between frontline realities and the technological ambitions of Berlin. Many officers viewed these weapons as distractions, political projects driven by Hitler's personal fascinations, or the influence of ideological technocrats like Himmler and Speer. While some branches, like the Luftwaffe, embraced certain innovations, most field units preferred weapons they could maintain and operate under combat conditions. The contradiction became stark by 1944. Commanders demanded basic ammunition and spare parts, while factories prioritized new experimental models with limited combat application. The myth of unified military endorsement conceals a deeper tension between Germany's strategic needs and its technological aspirations. In the end, the military bore the consequences of decisions made far from the front, in bunkers and boardrooms where optics mattered more than outcomes. The war was not lost for lack of innovation, but perhaps for too much of it, in the wrong hands. 15. The legacy of Nazi technology was purely scientific. Post-war narratives often compartmentalize Nazi weapons development as a scientific phenomenon, removed from ideology, separate from atrocity. The transfer of German scientists to the United States and Soviet Union is presented as a pragmatic move, driven by Cold War priorities, with little reflection on moral implications. This framing originates in the sanitized language of post-war intelligence operations. Operation Paperclip in the US and Operation Osławiakim in the USSR focused on extracting, technical knowledge while minimizing attention to Nazi affiliations. In official reports, engineers became experts, and war crimes were downplayed or ignored. But declassified documents, particularly from the U.S. Justice Department's Office of Special Investigations, reveal the ethical cost of this strategy. Wernher von Braun, the father of the U.S. space program, had direct oversight of forced labor at Mittelwerk. Hans Kammler, an SS general involved in weapons development and mass deportations, was shielded from prosecution in exchange for intelligence. Scholars such as Linda Hunt and Annie Jacobson have detailed how dossiers were altered or destroyed to protect reputations. The migration of knowledge came with the migration of silence. Scientific success in rocketry and aerospace was built in part on a foundation of suppressed accountability. The myth of scientific neutrality allows society to celebrate progress while forgetting its price. It separates technical achievement from the human cost, as if the two were ever unrelated. Behind every V2 trajectory and high-altitude test was a factory floor soaked in suffering. History, when viewed fully, refuses such separations. It reminds us that even the clean lines of a rocket carry the shadow of the camp. That truth was not lost on the survivors, though it was rarely asked of them. Understanding the legacy of Nazi technology means holding both stories at once: the brilliance of invention and the burden of its origin. Not to erase either, but to remember both. Even the most advanced weapons leave behind questions no blueprint can answer. Technology shaped the war, but it did not control its consequences. History rarely tells everything, but what it leaves behind still defines us. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe and keep history alive.